Welcome to our deep dive into The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fag by Mark Manson. You've given us this book, and you want to really grasp the main message, the key principles, and most importantly, I think, practical advice you can actually use. We're here to help you extract the gold from these pages.
It's great that you've chosen this book. The title might sound a bit provocative, but the subtle art isn't really about apathy. It's more about being selective with our energy and our attention.
Manson starts off with a really interesting story about Charles Bukowski. He was a writer, kind of a controversial figure.
Yeah, Bukowski was known for his, let's just say, unconventional lifestyle and views. He was a gambler, a womanizer, had a complicated relationship with alcohol, yet he found success as a writer, precisely by embracing his flaws and not really caring what others thought.
So Manson is challenging that traditional self-help idea that we should always strive for happiness and perfection.
Exactly. He actually argues that this constant pursuit of positivity can actually work against us, create more anxiety and dissatisfaction.
It's like that thing where you see everyone on social media with these perfect lives.
Right. And it creates this pressure to measure up, which can lead to more unhappiness because those picture-perfect lives are often just a facade.
It's like chasing a mirage.
Exactly. You never actually reach it. Manson calls this he calls it the feedback loop from hell.
Feedback loop from hell?
The feedback loop from hell, where you're basically anxious about your anxiety, or you're stressed about being stressed, and it just creates this vicious cycle.
So how do we break free from this loop?
Manson suggests we need to reevaluate our values. He distinguishes between good and bad values.
Okay, so what makes a value good or bad?
Good values are rooted in reality. They contribute to our well-being and the well-being of others. There are also things that are within our control, like honesty, responsibility, genuine kindness.
And bad values.
Think about things like the constant pursuit of pleasure, always needing to be right, or seeking validation from others. These can lead to a sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction.
It's about choosing the right struggles, the ones that are aligned with those good values, even if they're difficult.
That's a great way to put it. Manson uses this compelling story about a Japanese soldier, Hiroo Onoda. He continued fighting World War II for almost 30 years after it ended, refused to believe the war was over.
I remember that story. He was hiding out in the jungle, completely cut off.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of how, when our values are not grounded in reality, they can actually lead us astray. Onoda was so committed to duty and loyalty that he couldn't accept that the war was over, and he chose to stay in that struggle, enduring incredible hardship for decades.
We have to question our beliefs and be willing to adapt as we learn and grow.
Absolutely. And this leads us to self-awareness. Manson uses a really interesting analogy here. He compares self-awareness to an onion. Peeling back those layers can be challenging, but ultimately rewarding.
So it's about really understanding our motivations, our deepest values.
Exactly. Recognizing those patterns in our thinking and behavior that might be holding us back so we can take responsibility for our actions.
And he emphasizes that we can't change the past, but we can learn from it and make better choices in the present.
Yes. This leads to what Manson calls the do something principle. It's the idea that action often precedes motivation.
So instead of waiting to feel motivated,
You just start taking action. Even a small step can create momentum and inspire us to keep going. He says, action isn't just the effect of motivation, it's also the cause of it.
it's about breaking free from overthinking and procrastination. Just do something to get started.
Exactly. And this not giving effect philosophy applies to all areas of our lives, including our relationships.
So what does Manson say about relationships?
He emphasizes boundaries, that healthy relationships require both partners to have a strong sense of self.
So what does that look like in a real relationship?
Well, imagine your partner is constantly trying to control you or your emotions. A healthy boundary means communicating that you won't tolerate that, and even being willing to walk away.
That sounds tough.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that you deserve respect and that your well-being is important.
And this applies to all relationships, right? Not just romantic ones.
Absolutely. Friends, family, colleagues, even strangers. You deserve to have healthy boundaries with everyone. Manson also talks about this idea of choosing our struggles in relationships, that we often subconsciously choose partners who will recreate the same emotional patterns we're used to.
Even if those patterns are unhealthy.
It's like we're drawn to familiar struggles. But once we become aware of these patterns, we can start making different choices, and that's where real growth happens.
Now, there's this really interesting idea in the book the concept of death.
Manson suggests that death isn't something to be feared, but rather a lens through which we can view everything else.
Thinking about our mortality can be a bit unsettling, but it can also put things in perspective.
It reminds us that our time is limited and helps us to prioritize what really matters.
There's a quote from the book that captures this. It says, "The desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience." And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience.
It's about letting go of the need to control everything and embracing the full spectrum of human experience, both the good and the bad.
How do we actually apply this not giving effect philosophy every day? It's easy to talk about, but harder to actually do.
Manson has some practical strategies, like choosing our values wisely.
We talked about good values and bad values, but how do we even figure out what our values are?
That's a great question. There's no easy answer. But look at your actions and reactions. What consistently makes you feel good about yourself? What are you willing to fight for? Those are clues to your core values.
So pay attention to those moments where we feel purpose and meaning.
Exactly. And then align your actions with those values. Make choices that support them, even when it's hard. Another great strategy is what Manson calls the responsibility fault fallacy. It's understanding that we're not always at fault for what happens to us, but we're always responsible for how we respond.
Like when Manson talks about his first girlfriend cheating on him.
Instead of blaming her or feeling sorry for himself, he looked at his role in the situation. What he could have done differently. It was painful, but it led to growth.
It's about learning from our experiences, even the tough ones.
That's the real essence of not giving a feck, choosing to focus on what truly matters and letting go of the things that don't.
It's about choosing our battles wisely.
Yes, and accepting that life is unpredictable. We can't control everything, and that's okay. In fact, embracing that can be really liberating. We'll talk more about that later.
One theme keeps coming up: action. That taking action is crucial.
Absolutely. He calls it the do something principle. It's the idea that action often comes before motivation. Sometimes you just have to start doing something even if you don't feel like it.
Just do it, right?
Right. And this principle applies to so many things. Procrastination, building habits, reaching goals. It's about getting out of your head and into your life.
Okay, I'm curious about saying no more often.
Yes. It ties back to boundaries and choosing our values. Saying no to things that don't align with our values creates space to say yes to the things that do.
It can be hard to say no, especially to people we care about.
It can be challenging, but think about how often we say yes out of guilt or obligation, and then we end up feeling resentful and exhausted.
It's like we're poisoning ourselves with all those small yeses.
Exactly. Saying no is a form of self-care. You prioritize your well-being and make space for the things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
It's about choosing to focus on the things that are aligned with our values.
Yes.
You know, this deep dive is making me realize something. We're not always going to get it right. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to fail.
That's true. But Manson actually argues that failure is essential for growth.
He has a whole chapter called Failure is the Way Forward.
That's right. He talks about being fired from jobs, his early attempts at business, total disasters. But he learned from those experiences.
It's about seeing failure as feedback.
Exactly. And realizing that success is not a straight line. There will be bumps along the way.
What about finding meaning and purpose? That's something so many people struggle with.
Manson doesn't give a simple answer. He encourages us to define it for ourselves, based on our own values and experiences. He argues that meaning comes from choosing our struggles.
So it's not about finding some big purpose that's already out there.
Right. It's about creating our own meaning through the things we do and the choices we make.
And that meaning is not a destination.
It's a journey. It's about growing and changing.
I love that. It's about accepting life's imperfections.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this book so powerful. It's not about being perfect. It's about accepting ourselves and our lives as they are and making the most of it.
It's about caring about the right things.
You got it.
This has been eye-opening. This book really challenges conventional thinking about happiness, success, meaning in life.
It does. And it's not just theory. It's full of practical advice, things we can actually use in our own lives.
Before we finish this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about one more concept that I think is central to not giving a feck.
Okay, I'm listening. What is it? It's uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Okay. Yeah. Manson talks a lot about embracing uncertainty, letting go of the need to control every little thing.
I can see how that fits with the whole not giving a feck idea.
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of the opposite of what we're always told? You know, plan ahead, be prepared.
It is. But trying to control everything just leads to more anxiety because you can't control everything. Life is full of surprises, good and bad.
So we should just accept that.
Exactly. Uncertainty is just part of life. We have to learn to get comfortable with it.
That's easier said than done, I think, for a lot of people.
It's not easy. The book has some tips for handling uncertainty, though. One is to focus on what you can control. Don't waste energy worrying about things you can't change.
Okay, that makes sense.
And mindfulness can be really helpful, just being present in the moment,
Yeah.
not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
So focus on the present. Control what you can. What else?
He also talks about looking at fear and failure differently. We often avoid uncertainty because we're afraid of what might happen.
But we were just saying failure is part of how we grow.
Exactly. So maybe we can see fear and failure as chances to learn.
Shift from being scared to being curious.
Now, one of the more interesting ideas, Manson talks about killing yourself.
Whoa, hold on. Killing yourself.
It's a metaphor.
Okay, that's good to know. So what does he mean by that?
He means letting go of those fixed ideas about who you are, those limiting beliefs that hold you back.
Those beliefs that are based on fear.
Exactly. They give us a sense of security, but they can be really limiting.
So be more flexible. Open to new things.
Yeah, recognize that you're constantly evolving. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago.
Kill those old beliefs.
Yeah.
And be open to what you might become. So we've got embracing uncertainty, focusing on what we can control, practicing mindfulness, reframing how we think about fear and failure, and letting go of our old selves, metaphorically speaking. Anything else important from the book?
There's one more thing I wanted to touch on. Manson's view of happiness. He says happiness isn't something you achieve, it's something you experience along the way.
So don't chase happiness.
Create a life that's meaningful, that aligns with your values.
And he says that might not always be easy.
No, there will be challenges, setbacks.
Yeah.
But that's how we learn and grow.
Just like choosing our struggles, right?
Yes. Life isn't about avoiding pain or discomfort. Those things are part of being human.
Find the beauty in those imperfections.
Exactly. Life isn't just highlights. It's a journey with ups and downs. And those unexpected moments are often where we find the most meaning.
You know, it seems like the subtle art of not giving a feck isn't really about not caring at all. It's about caring about the things that matter.
You've got it. Being intentional with our energy, choosing what's truly important to us.
And facing the uncertainty of life with an open mind.
Exactly. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and that's perfectly fine. It's about always learning and growing.
This has been really insightful. We've covered a lot. But what can our listeners do with all this? What's the practical advice?
Let's summarize what we've discussed and give them some concrete steps for how to put these ideas into action.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. All right, so we've talked about a lot, from the subtle art of not giving a feck.
We've really challenged some of those typical self-help ideas about happiness and perfection, explored that whole feedback loop from hell and how it keeps us stuck.
And how important it is to choose values that really mean something and actually act on those values.
Taking responsibility for our own reactions, not blaming others.
Facing the unknown, not needing to have all the answers.
We even touched on practical stuff, like mindfulness and focusing on what we can control. Oh, and remember, killing our old selves,
Yeah.
metaphorically, of course.
Right. So much good stuff. But what can our listeners actually do with all this?
That's the key question, isn't it? I think the first step is identifying those bad values, the things they're wasting energy on.
Like always needing everyone to approve of them, or stressing about stuff they can't change.
Or holding on to an idea of themselves that just doesn't fit anymore.
Once they see those bad values, they can start focusing on the good ones.
The ones that truly reflect who they are and help them grow.
It's not about being perfect, right?
It's definitely not. Progress over perfection every time. And remember that do something principle we talked about.
Such a good one. Simple and powerful.
Instead of waiting to feel motivated, just take action, even if it's tiny.
Like if they've been meaning to start exercising or learn a new language.
Just do it, even for 5 minutes.
Because action creates the motivation, not the other way around.
Right. Now, with uncertainty, remember, we can focus on what's in our control. Mindfulness can help too.
And thinking of fear and failure differently, as chances to learn.
Exactly. And if they're feeling really stuck, maybe it's time to kill those old beliefs that don't serve them anymore.
Be open to who they might become.
That's the spirit. You know, this whole book really comes down to personal responsibility.
It does, doesn't it? It's not about blaming other people. It's about owning our choices, our reactions.
And knowing we have the power to create the life we want, even when things are tough, even with all the uncertainty.
To everyone listening, take what we've talked about and make it your own. Figure out which struggles you choose to take on. Be okay with not knowing everything. And don't waste your energy on things that don't really matter.
Be patient with yourself. Celebrate the small wins.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck. We hope it's giving you some new ways to think about things.
And as Mark Manson says, not giving a feck is all about being comfortable with being different. So go out there and be your true, authentic self.